morning!
7. Good
Woo!
morning.
I
I feel like
know. I
doing.
feel. Go on. You feel like
I,
doing
good morning, Popper. That's from some famous film, right?
yeah, like Good
Um,
Morning Vietnam,
yeah,
that Robin Williams film.
exactly. I love it.
Yeah.
How are
So
you
good to.
doing?
Oh, I'm fantastic. I'm happy to be here with you, Ailbhe.
Me
Back
too.
in, back
Every day, Katie.
back home for the first time in a long time, and
Woohoo!
sadly we had some technical difficulties on our in-person popper, but we'll have to remedy that
Oh my
soon.
God, can you believe it?
Definitely.
After all our efforts, but that is technology, right? And we just need to roll with that too.
Yeah, it
It's
was
a good
bound to
excuse.
happen.
Do you
Bound to
know,
happen once, right?
that's true. I'm really excited about the idea of being able to learn a Hopper study twice. That's kind of a relatively new experience for me.
Yeah.
So when we go back and do that one, it'll be very exciting. I wonder will it be better?
Hmm.
Who knows? Let's hope
Maybe.
so. Growth in our
Yes.
cello playing.
Yes.
So, what did you think of Packer 7?
Well, I'll tell you what I was thinking this morning. I was thinking about something my very first cello teacher said about popper, which is that popper studies are all about the bow. And I remember thinking when I was like 13 or whatever that, well, that's not true. It's all about the left hand because the left hand's so hard. But I think this study really triggered that thought in my head that this is really about the bow because no matter what pyrotechnics you can do with the left hand, if it's not speaking and it's not like grounded with the bow, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter at all because it's all
yeah,
about the sound that's being created with those notes, and of course that affects the intonation and everything else.
100%.
And
Yeah.
I was also thinking about something that I don't think we talked about that much in popper, but like another general thing that I always talk about with my students, but it's this sense of like how much the bow grounds the left hand.
Mm,
If you're feeling uncertain and not really connected to the string with the bow, then this just kind of doesn't work under pressure. It might when you're practicing, but if you have to do something, you know, I think the connection between these two things is so
yeah,
important. So I think this is
absolutely.
a great study to focus on that and the
Mm,
relationship between the two. Of course, all of them are, but this one is especially, I think.
yeah, it's deceptively tricky, actually.
Yeah.
It looks quite easy on the page, but I think the beauty of it is when you're doing your shifting and that bow control, how your left hand really has to be quite fluid in all of its shifting movements, or else it'll interrupt the sound.
Mm.
So there's so many moments where these big shifts, but the bow really has to balance and not let the sound go anywhere while you're doing this big rotational shift.
Yeah.
So I think the combination of that is really, really, really fascinating. Um,
Yeah.
so
Totally.
so how did
So,
you approach this when you started?
well, good question. I think I had played this a long time ago. This one. So, but I
Yeah.
didn't remember it too well. So I did my usual, my usual go-to.
Stoppy
Oh,
starty.
Stuffy Starty.
I actually thought, Alpha, maybe this week, maybe you'll do some stoppy starty. And yeah, there wasn't any time, turns out.
Yeah,
Too many
yeah.
concerts this week.
Well,
Oh, did
I'll
I
tell you.
mention? I
No.
was just going to say that I played to my first live indoor audience. I had 3 concerts this week with live audiences. Woo woo! It
Woo!
was
All right.
actually very exciting, and the second and third were really interactive, where I literally cried laughing on stage. It was so hilarious.
Oh
There was
my
just so much
gosh.
excitement in the room. Like we were excited to be on stage and have an audience, and they were excited to be at a concert. So there was just like pure hilarity. It was like a comedy show, actually. Very entertaining. Yeah.
It is incredible, isn't it? It's amazing
It's good. I missed it.
how essential it is to human
Oh,
existence. Anyway,
seriously. My God. Sorry. Stoppy starty. Continue.
well, I just think it's such a good place to start because you do that first bar and you find, oh, okay, this is going to be tricky for bow distribution. Oh, and string crossing, and you kind of already have this mental map of how much you need to save the bow, which parts are going to require more kind of finesse and concentration with what's happening here and different things like that. Then, when you go through it and you see there's definitely some spots that are more difficult for the left hand. But yeah, so that was how I approached it initially. How about you? What did you kind of do?
I definitely just for the left hand would have done that. Now, actually, I didn't do that personally because I like to speed up my process when I'm doing things. So I would always just check and see when I have to change my bow. So I think in beats like that. So I think about my bow and open strings, and especially in the second bar. So that's an anti-clockwise circle for me.
But it's up bow, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a mix of both, isn't it? It's like you're almost going clockwise and then anti-clockwise. It's funny. But you do have to think about that bow and open strings because that's where you'll get caught out. So if the bow doesn't know where it's going, so quite a lot of this is totally fine when it comes to where the bow should go. Third bar. So the rhythm of the bow is different. So I think a lot about the bow string crossing rhythm. So I'm 100% clear of where that happens. So if I was going to speed up the process for myself, a lot of it would be that's right, and then so to practice. Now obviously you don't have to sing completely out of tune when you're doing it, but my range isn't fabulous when it comes to this kind of a study.
Popper.
But you see
how'd you range at bar 28, Ailbhe? How many of those notes can you sing?
I do a mean falsetto. So, but at least I'm prepared beforehand of what my bow has to do, and then I can literally just focus on having a really glidey left hand during my shifts. So I would always think about it like that, because often I find lack of clarity is because the bow doesn't know where it's going, or it has moved up too slowly. You need to actually level up a bit sooner or level down a bit sooner.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because I think that's such a great way to practice this and so many things. And it is something I do a lot. However, you've inspired me next level this year with now I think so much about bow circles when I'm doing that sort of like open string practice. I know, I need seriously like a bow circles retreat with you.
It's just hours of entertainment. Well, I think Steve Doan does market it. I think I just stole it. But he he's one of those legends, and it just makes everything easy. That's what I like about it. I then also, again, if I had loads of time, I did a tiny bit of this, but just to see, I'd love to have as much bow as possible, so I don't feel squeezed ever. So, doing 2 bows in one is always a great one. That kind of idea where you are, if you can do that, then the 1 bar is like, what else?
Yeah, well, you made that look easy, so 1 bar is going to be a cinch for you.
You see, you notice I started at the beginning, I didn't demonstrate later in the piece. But I do love what really challenges you here is at the beginning you're like, I've got my bow speed already, it's good to go. And then you spend 2 lines doing half speed, because obviously we're going up here and it's nicer to use a bit more of a flowy bow. I think that's why Popper is doing that, to actually let the sound sing when you're up so high. But bar 9, every time I got there, even though it was the exact same as the distance really for the first 2 lines, suddenly I had to remember to save and go at a totally different speed there, or else I'd run out of bow. What about you?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. I hadn't thought about this in this study, but yes, like that is totally a thing that catches you off. And Also, there's no dynamics in this one apart from, oh, well, there's, I guess, a piano in bar 15, but it's forte all the way through. I mean, there's more dynamics in the second half. I lied. But it's all forte for almost the whole first page. So,
I love when you lie. It's just so exciting, keeping me guessing, you know.
Did you look at all the dynamics? You know, practice what you preach, right? We're all telling our students, like, well, when it comes back, it's a different dynamic, so you have to do it differently. Anyway, this one, too, is a study that doesn't do the comeback thing, right? It has a lot of, like, similar but new material, this study. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just checking, because I'm like,
you know,
that's kind of rare for Popper.
It is rare, and also it's unfortunate for Ailbhe, who only ever learns half a study before we meet. So I had to actually learn the whole thing, which just, you know how I feel about this. So what else did I think was very interesting? What about the difference between playing this kind of a bow at the very beginning and then, let's say, somewhere up in the higher regions of thumb position? What did you think about the difference in your bow technique and how it had to feel? Did you have any thoughts?
So definitely you want to feel, I think, even more connection to the string and obviously closer to the bridge, all that stuff. Yeah. But because of the sinuous nature of this study, so for example, let's take words. Like
sinuous.
From bar 9 where we go. When we're up there, it starts to get, we want to have that connection, but it's really easy to just start flailing around with all those string crossings. So it's also about efficiency of motion and that we're not making a larger motion down to the string. So I like to think of a lot of this with what part of my arm is moving in my bow arm and when do I need to use more or less. Because, we can't always play with our upper arm up here and just doing this all the time because we need times to relax. But I do think that it's a huge, huge advantage if you can find places where you're just doing this sort of lever motion, with your arm, rather than every time lowering it up and down.
And I also think there are many opportunities here where you can actually just use the height in your fingers. So even cut out the elbow and the arm entirely, if you can, there was definitely a moment in here, so bar 5, for example. So here, so I'm not, if you see my arm, I'm not using any of my elbow or my arm. It's literally, you can see my little finger using that and staying on the level of the higher string that you're staying on all the time, or else you get this really jumpy. You really do need to think about that option. So it's good to break it down like that, to be aware of what parts of your arm you're using and what's the least amount of energy you can expend. I was going to say expel. Either or.
Yeah. Well, it's also, with all this bow stuff, I don't know if we've talked about this in Popper, but I know you subscribe to this idea of pronation and supination, in the arm. And 100%. Like a lot of this stuff with the fingers and when we're doing smaller motions, it's so related to the same motion we need when we do a long down bow and up bow, even on an open string, where it's the sort of sense of like torque in your arm as you go out. It's channeling all that strength. And I think it's important to mention it in this one because, it is all these complicated string crossings, and inevitably, if you're not really thinking about that, every, tip of your bow is going to be softer. And so, what you're saying with the hand and how you maintain the arm level, I think is also related to this feeling of torque. And it's not, it's not anything to do with your wrist. It's to do with how you're channeling weight through your arm.
Definitely for me, with absolutely no effort whatsoever, if I pull out a bow and then pronate, so you can see my elbow just turns up and over a little bit. I've been saying recently to my students that it's like you're pouring water through your first finger. So it's like...
That's a good one.
Yeah, I'm sure I found that somewhere else.
but as you pour in, so you feel like it's going like a teapot into your first finger. And then with no effort whatsoever, without really putting any extra weight on or anything, then it maintains the sound much better from heel to tip. So obviously you don't need to have any effort here, which is why your hand can be much more relaxed. But then as we go out, it's without, my shoulder's still totally relaxed, but just by virtue of that, then we have a healthy amount of grip and weight.
Yeah, totally. Healthy.
That was for dramatic effect. Yeah, I love
it.
What about your shifts? I wondered how you approach the shifts in the area of 19. So obviously 18 is fine because you're going to a harmonic. So you can actually just totally release and just shift. But 19 and 20 with that thumb shift.
Yeah.
Did you have any particular thoughts about how you did it? Do you just leave your finger down late and then shift?
In terms of the motion, you mean, or in terms of how you find the note?
Yeah, so no. In terms of the motion, what I was thinking about in practice is obviously, so your options are release, but I don't want to hear any of the extra sound. So I was thinking, if I actually do a substitution where I'm substituting my thumb the same way I would from 3 to 2 or 3 to 1. I found that really fascinating because you don't do that so much with your thumb, do you?
Yeah, you don't. I mean, it's interesting the way you think about it, because I have to say, like, it's, I learned so much just hearing you talk about cello, because I think about stuff differently, and like that
thank you.
I didn't consciously think about that shift actually, which is bad of me because if I was teaching this, I would need to. But I really just think with those smaller shifts, I'm thinking about being relaxed and the geography of where I need to travel. So for me, I see a shift like that and I'm like, oh, that's easy because I only really need to move. My motion is bigger, but the distance in terms of pitch that I need to go is a half step. So I can kind of measure, from my second finger. And that is the guiding force in what's
will you do that again?
And I think a lot of this too, it's gestural. Like I think it helps us a lot when we're playing difficult stuff to not think about each note that we're playing, but about how already from this note I'm already thinking about the shift. So it's kind of a down up really. So
exactly. I think when people are practicing this, I'm trying to break it down for people who don't do these type of shifts very often. It's the first approach. So it's down, up, and then so the weight, as you're traveling to your second finger, the weight comes up, and then the weight literally comes down at the moment you've reached your thumb on the next one.
Yeah.
So that's to avoid so that's when my weight is down and I'm scooping down and up. So instead, up, and then down, just as you move as you're up, and then you're down. So that seems like a big exaggerated motion for a shift, but you need to practice it like that first so that you get that feeling when you're here. To hear the way you can hear a little bit there. That's why I was wondering about substituting.
You're so right, Ailbhe, and I think just you talking about it has reminded me of how much, whenever somebody is approaching these things for the first time, it's kind of like human nature to just be like, I don't want to fall off the cello, and so we end up like pressing everything down all the time, and we take it for granted, or certainly I take it for granted sometimes that once you're kind of fluent with this sort of technical stuff,
motion.
The up and down does become more natural. But you're right, it is something we all have to focus on and think about in order to do.
Quite often for me, the reason I would be thinking about it is because I might hear a sound. I mean, that's totally acceptable, but if you hear too much of a sound, then you have to break it down a little bit to see where it's the timing of my weight down and up that I need to really think about. But the reason I was getting all nerdy on it is because, so you can obviously do the big gesture, shift, and you're in. That's the easiest. But I'm thinking now a little bit, just as an added tool in your toolbox, to have a slightly more malleable. So you actually substitute it in like you would, you know, that way. And I don't normally use my thumb as a malleable finger, but I thought, you know, that would also be a different way to approach it. Now, it does feel slightly differently because it's a smaller motion, but see the way you're breaking your hand position, which is, people don't love that in general, but I think anything you can do to give yourself extra tools.
It's a good tool to have, absolutely. I'm just thinking, I need to add that to my toolbox.
Yeah. We'll do this on the second go, right?
Yeah, on the second go, Popper 2.0, like, malleable shift.
That's when we're like in our 70s, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. Jesus. Yeah, we'll need 3 decades to recover
so
from
funny.
this year. What else? Oh, question for you. Okay, so bar 29. You know I loved these 2 bars, 28 and 29. Not.
I thought you might have.
So up there.
Yeah.
Okay, did you do the fingering that's in the Baron Raider?
Yes, I did. And actually, we should check. I think it's a terrible fingering, but let's have a look at International and see what they said. Yeah, exactly the same one. So actually, I take it back, Baron Rider. I just think everyone uses a terrible fingering.
I couldn't think of a better one though, but it's sort of, Popper wants you to be able to do this like horrible kind of, you know, big hand position. And I don't really have a good approach apart from just sort of memorizing the distance of those notes, because it, to me, does not feel very centered up there, no matter.
I don't think it does for anyone.
But I think that's the point. I think Popper wants to be like, you've just got to pick these notes out and know where they are. But I don't know if you have a better strategy.
I mean, have you ever played Dance of the Elves? Like, that's exactly what that is. You just need to know where they are. And so when you're there and you're actually approaching this whole piece as you go down, there is a bit of a brain melt for you to actually just figure out the hand position and work with that. That's just something that is muscular, that you have to just know, okay, this is my thumb distance and these fingers. So it's a similar approach, I thought. What I found really hilarious about this was, let's say I'm trying to chance my arm and learn something fast, which often happens.
No kidding, Ailbhe.
Yeah, I have to learn Ligeti string quartet in a week's time. That's going to be fun. That's not an easy fast learn. Let's put that there.
I can imagine.
Maybe I should have given myself a bit more time. This is not for a concert. It's only for a rehearsal, by the way, just to put out my professional, you know,
yes.
Whatever. So, for me, I always find it funny when I have to put one finger down. So it's all fine if it's all harmonics for me, grand.
Yeah.
But, for example, that note. So I'd have to practice quite a lot. And then I'm like, okay, so the rest in that bar are harmonics, fine. As in more bow weight. And here the problem for me was actually the bowing. So often I'd smack onto the A string. Like, I actually spent a lot of the time in practice doing, because I was like, do you recognize the tune? And I literally was like, right, Ailbhe, maybe if you use that time that you're entertaining yourself on those harmonics, actually practicing the study, that would be much more helpful. But I had loads of fun doing it. And then trying to practice the whole thing in rhythms and threes. Kind of that idea, which is slow practice. And then on top of that, trying to see could I do bar 29 with half of the bow. Because I really found I struggled by the time I got down to the heel with all the string crossings if you're too close to the heel.
Yeah.
I mean, you can still do it, it's just slightly more awkward. But
it's all
fascinating
the things,
bar.
isn't it? Yeah,
It
it's
is
all the things with, you know, bow distribution, bow placement, harmonics, hands.
Some notes that are not harmonics.
Yeah,
thrown
it's
in there.
like-
So
It's a lot.
I think maybe just the last thing I was going to talk about, which I found interesting, bar 31.
Yeah.
So that's actually an up bow, right? So when you start on this, I found I had to prepare my left hand fingers earlier than I thought. You probably did as well.
For the string crossing, you mean?
But also for the top note, because I found even here, if you actually just put your first finger up there, then it's too late. So you had to go first, second, first. So I had to actually do a bit of a first finger shimmy.
Yeah,
Early.
totally, because it's jumping across. This is a great bar, by the way, a general thing about this one, but this is a great bar to just practice all your fourths and stuff.
Yeah.
Because even if you feel like really all over the shop on this, or you feel really secure, I should say, you feel really good about it, it's super hard because it's all fourths everywhere and stuff. So, yeah.
And I would do that everywhere. Bar 5, just find those intervals and make them sing.
Totally.
Super.
Right.
Should we go for a play?
Let's do it. Is it? Woohoo! Yay!
Yay! Yippee!
It is harder than it looks, this one. I don't know.
Go us!
Yes, go us. So, thanks, Ailbhe, and looking forward to seeing you next
Oh my
week
gosh.
or whatever.
Next
week
time!
is. Woo! Yay!
Yeah.
See ya! Bye!